Alright, got the grandson snoozing for now. He's not feeling good, so I don't see me getting a lot done today. But I thought I'd revisit the dungeon thing where I'm going over the stuff I use for dungeons. I'm going to go straight into another section because, like I said, they divide up the whole levels into all the levels into quadrants in Stonehell, and it's a one-page dungeon design. So you can run it with one page, and then there's usually 2 to 4 or maybe sometimes 6, where you go into the overview of the whole level, the history of it, and then the population, and then the specific dungeon notes. You know, very simple. I used to do that with index cards for dungeons I made. So if I had an asterisk on a room, that meant there was an index card that had more depth besides feature, creature, trap, or treasure. Right? Simple. Just I call it the bullet point dungeon. And then you riff, and then you can describe it on the fly, but you don't have all this stuff pre-written out to where you sound like you're reading it out, like you're reading it out. And I do believe that reading it out, even if you can do it slightly dramatically, is not as good as if you do it from the cuff, from your own, just riffing. But the antechamber is your entry to Stonehell. So it's got traps that aren't super lethal. There is one trap in there that could be a TP key trap. And because it's a greed trap, and I think it does 2d6 damage. But let me double check. Yeah, 30. Yeah. All within 10 feet, save versus petrify, or take 2d6. So it's a greed trap that if you rush and grab it, you could wipe your party with a good old 2d6. Now, I used to just roll 2d6 or a damage for a trap or an area effect and apply it to the whole party. Now I have players roll the damage themselves. So if it's a 2d6 trap, roll 2d6 for me. That'll let you also ferret out which dice run hot at your table if you got a table, a face-to-face table game, because there'll be certain dice they're just going to go, no, we're not using these dice. Not all dice are created equal, guys. Some favor some numbers. It does seem to follow my philosophy of not putting a trap too often. Like every 8 rooms a trap. Every 8. No more than 1 per every 8 encounters, unless it's a theme dungeon or it's like a treasure hall and there's just stacks of chests. And they're all trapped, right? The creatures on the level, extra brigands left over from the brigand cave above, but mainly kobolds and orcs. And as we've gone over, the kobolds are cowardly and they'll run. But one of the more vicious animals on the lower levels, I think, are the giant toads. Because if you have any dwarves or gnomes or halflings, they can get swallowed up. And if you're swallowed at low level, you're just done. But 2d4 appearing on the orcs. A wandering monster encounter can be really, really rough. And these are once every 2 turns. 1 and 6 standard. One of the features in Hell's Antechamber is the introduction of the random chance trap, right? It's not a trap, it's a feature. You roll it, and it's a 50-50 chance you get something good or you get something bad. And it's a d6 for columns, 1 through 3 wheel, 4 through 6 woe, and then there's 10 things that could happen. Now, what I've done is I use standard, what it says there, for a couple levels. If the characters keep going back to it and they go up levels, I change the whole chart and I make it more dangerous based upon their level, right? Some of that stuff is just not as appealing when you're from first to third, right? And so I change it completely, and they'll go back and they'll memorize the numbers. And when they get a different effect, then the whole notion of the font of chaos that is Stonehell starts to make sense. I don't really have to change the rooms around, which I have completely changed the rooms around. That hall that went to the room that had all these weird features in it now ends in a room with a fountain. That fountain wasn't there before. This is a whole fountain. No one built this. This looks really old. And weird stuff like that will mess with your players. And then as they get to the deeper levels, you can just really, you have justification to do anything crazy you want. We'll get to that later. So it introduces a unique spell, which I don't think you can actually find. There's not a scroll of it. There's an effect, and if you want, you can put this in a lost spellbook in the dungeon and connect a wizard's old layer back to an effect that they found on the first level. Which, I'll be honest, I've done that, and they forgot. They couldn't correlate it. They forgot it, that it even happened. And this is where the faction play starts as well. Faction play starts immediately in the first quadrant of Stonehill, because you have an NPC named Snorri Broadshoulders, and he's in a room that is a dwarven architectural masterpiece. Because Stonehill, being a prison and a thought experiment, they put political prisoners in there, and then they start interjecting stuff and observing it to create what would happen when you did all these things to people. And it became entertainment for a mad overlord and his wizard, right? And Snorri's there. What happens when you throw dwarves underground and say you got to work for your food? Well, they're going to prosper. That's what they do. Okay, you're going to make us work, and that's how we get fed, and blah, 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 whatever. We're going to do that anyway. They even get to the point where they go down and they create their own dwarf hole deeper beyond the reach of the guards. So they just started up a new civilization. More on that later. But Snorri's there to record all that, and he has a bunch of bodyguards. This turns into a place you can fall back to. A quest opportunity, because he offers 50 gold for you to escort him to any other dwarven features in the dungeon. So as you do that, they're going to be going to that feature to record it, and he's very meticulous. So they're doing a rubbing of every single thing on the wall, and they're measuring every single thing in the wall, right? So they're just being ridiculous. But then you have this faction that you can move around in the dungeon, and if they're on friendly terms with the party, and the party is always informing them of dwarven artifacts or dwarven rooms in the dungeon, then those are like NPCs who can set up a safe zone that you can fall back to. Now, I've had my players, they would stop off and leave their pack animals and stuff and stay with Snorri's camp outside of Stonehill. So they would have extra camp guards, and they would throw them some coinage, right? So the guards get a bonus for doing what they were doing already, and if you don't come back, they get to keep your donkeys. And they're like, okay, sure, that seems like a good deal for us. And the more you help Snorri with his delving to learn dwarven lore inside Stonehill, it's a faction, a surface faction that can aid you in the dungeon and possibly hire those dwarves to do stuff in the dungeon. Why use a regular porter from town, a 0-level scrub who's quaking in his boots, if you can borrow a dwarf 1 or dwarf fighter 1, how you're running your gang to do that stuff as porters? Well, I don't think you're telling us everything that's down there. You take Bilbo and Balbo, and they will accompany you if you pay them, and they report back to Snorri. Seems very reasonable to me. Now, I've always upped the level on Snorri. He's presented as a level 1 dwarf who's wealthy and well known for architecture. So I treat him as a sage and about third level dwarf or third level fighter. Otherwise, they're just one level 1 speed bumps that can get rolled over. We pull back these 7 orcs to this room where the dwarves are, and it doesn't turn out well for the dwarves. I've had that happen. You guys got Snorri and all his buddies killed, and then I've had it where they've really set Snorri and them up. I like things. I'd like to see another group of adventurers tackle Stonehell as a theme group. Maybe all elves or all dwarves who are coming to find the Dwarven Hermitage or put an end to the Chaos Font, or you know, I like themes. I do, and it helps people focus on the strength of a demi-human abilities outside of we need a striker, a tank, a healer, a mage. You can tackle these dungeons differently. We're going pure stealth. We're all thieves. We're not really want to fight anybody. We can fight just long enough to retreat, but our main goal is to sneak through here, backstab, and instill terror. Maybe poison people. A whole group of assassins trying to get. We do. We just sneak around and we find where the orcs are and we trade with them and then just poison them, and then we go back and get their stuff. You could do that. With monster reaction rows and the way the kobolds are set up in here, you really could be combat avoidant except for the dumb animals and the spiders, and just flat play everybody off on each other to a point, right? But yeah, the Hell's Antechamber is a good intro, and then it has entries to a couple other sections. It goes over to the Unquiet Halls, and then down to the Contested Halls, and those will be others I'm covering here shortly. And a straight shot to the second level. So there's 3 exits. And how I run my game with this, that's 150, 150, 150. An opportunity just from this to get 450 XP bonus, which is important because, like I said, if you're doing go for XP, this area is stingy. There's also lots of save or die monsters. Snakes. They get a lot of poisonous snakes. And speeders. So you got your spiders and your snakes. And 1 or 2 encounters, which could go really bad for your characters fast. So there's a TPK option for first level characters. Your higher level, that 2d6 ain't going to be a big a deal. And the orc fight could be a little bit sketchy for low level characters. But I think I'd like to see a group of pure thieves, or people wanting to do it a different way. I may just end up staying up later and having another Stonehell and see who's up for it. But yeah, Hell's Antechamber. It's a good intro, and it gives you some foreshadowing. There's a room of corpses that, if you really think about it, why are they collecting the bodies? And it gives you foreshadowing to creatures who layer on the 4th level who trade with the kobolds for corpses. Yeah, so the foreshadowing is here, even though it's kind of all over the place. I know people are going to be critical of it because it stacks on top. It doesn't make architectural sense. Blah blah. It's a fancy game, guys, and this is all influenced by chaos. There is something that will rearrange the rooms if you're not looking, and it's made to be nuts. So the deeper you go, the crazier it gets. And on the first level, you can see the madness would be in how the kobolds interact with everything, because they know more than they ever let on, and I never let them be used as a font of information. It seems like it's too much peeking behind the veil. There's also a big talking head in there, reminiscent of the big stone head from Greyhawk Castle, where you can ask it cryptic questions, and sometimes it lies to you. Sometimes it gives you information that you wouldn't normally know. So you're never 100% certain. So that's kind of handy. I've had players who always spun the wheel and always talked to the stone head before they went anywhere else in the dungeon. So you're always rolling restocks for this level, and they're always going back and spending several turns, about 15 to 20 minutes your sessage, on the first level, the entry area, before hauling ass down to deeper levels. and it does sometimes become part of a party's standard operating procedure. Let's go ask the head some questions about this place that we're going to now. See if we get any more information. And but I've had people just double down on it, and other players who just one day fine, done. We don't want to deal with that thing anymore, ever. We never go back to it. Have questions about why things are a certain way on a lower level, but never go back and ask the head, ever. You know, people forget stuff. Yeah. But Hell's Antechamber, it's Section 1A. Later, guys.